Well, these are the weekends we live for. If you're a racing fan, if you love handicapping, there isn't just a Super Saturday ahead. It's 3 days with seven graded stakes, all win and you're in races for the Breeders' Cup. We're going to cover all the action from coast to coast, Santa Anita to Belmont and back. And we're going to do it with our special guest handicappers and Stats Race Lens diehards, TVG's Christina Blacker and last year's NHC Tour Rookie of the Year, Joe Rosen. Christina, let's start with you. Welcome back. And boy, what a weekend out in California. Your backyard on Friday. It all kicks off with two Breeders' Cup qualifiers in the juvenile divisions in the American Faro Stakes, the Chandelier Steaks. We'll jump into all the races in a moment, but I'm curious, do you think we might find better opportunities on Friday, or should we wait until a little later in the weekend where we have more action at Santa Anita?
That's a very good question. I actually have a price on Saturday that I really like. So I'm going to say Friday may be a little bit more formful. I'm actually not going to choose the morning line favorite in the American Pharoah, 8 Rings, just because of his sort of antics in his last race. So I think you might get maybe your second or third choice there. But I'm going to really go for it with a price on Saturday. So I think for me, that's where I'll find the most value.
All right, I'd like how you give us a little bit of a tease there, so you got to stick around to hear who Christina likes. Let's kick it over to Joe Rosen. Joe, not only must you be excited to bet on some of these races, you've also got a couple of personal stakes, ownership stakes. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've owned horses for about or pieces of horses for about 20 years now. I've owned with both Little Red Feather and Eclipse Thoroughbred, as I grew up with both the managing partners of those groups. So I know those groups very well, and I'm lucky to have both Mirth running on in the Rodeo Drive, and I have Secret Spice running on Sunday in the Zenyatta Stakes. Looking forward to both of them.
Well, we'll wait for your non-biased opinions in those races. Um, this is the weekend to get involved, whether you're a casual player, an everyday player, every weekend player. It's especially the weekend to get involved with Stats Race Lens because there's a special offer right now. You can sign up for a quarterly unlimited subscription to Stats for just $199. That's $100 off the regular price, and it gets you access to every track every day. All you got to do is use the promo code ROAD2BC. The offer open to all customers, so even if you've used the Stats code before, you can still use this one, ROAD2BC, and you get an unlimited quarterly subscription for just $199. All right, let's jump into the action. We start with the Chandelier Stakes. Goes off as the 5th race at Santa Anita on Friday. Bob Baffert has trained the winner of this race 10 times, going back to when it was the Oakleaf Stakes. He's got the 3-5 morning line favorite, Bast, and many have taken notice that it isn't Mike Smith aboard, it isn't Drayden Van Dyke or any local rider. Instead, it's John Velasquez in to ride Baffert's top runners this weekend. Christina, you would have more insight than anyone, I would think, being out there. What should we make of that, and what do you make of Bast?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think, part of what sort of played into that was Drayden Van Dyke and returning from his injury that he actually suffered when he rode 8 Rings back in the Del Mar Futurity, and Baffert not knowing whether or not he was going to be able to secure him for that horse. So that's how you ended up with Johnny V there. And perhaps it was, a package deal, a 2-for-1 if John's going to make the trip out here. He wants to make it worthwhile, and he, of course, wants to hold on to these horses if possible into the Breeders' Cup. So I think there's probably a lot of layers to it. I'm actually starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at Santa Anita for TVG, and that's one of the first things that we're going to address is to try and hunt down Bob Baffert and find a little bit more information about these horses. But as far as the Chandelier goes, guys, I just have a really hard time going against Bast. It looks near impossible to me. She just looks too good in this race. She's run a couple times so far. Her career debut was a good one behind a lightning fast filly in Inspiressa. Then she came back at that 7 furlong distance in the Del Mar Debutante, and she put it together in such a big way. And coming up on Friday, she gets her first chance to go 2 turns. And as far as the stats go, if you pull the offspring of Uncle Mo the first time they attempt that dirt route, this is a very high percentage for his offspring. It's sort of one of those tried and true that you can always go back to. He's 24% in this circumstance. 52% of the time they hit the board, but you really are just expecting this filly to win. She's scopy. She carries her head low, has that kind of long stride, that action that Bob Baffert really likes. You'll find that a lot of his horses kind of tend to move this way. I was sort of curious because I couldn't go against her, and I wanted to know what the True Odds page had to say, because one of the things that they offer you there is a win percentage probability, and you're looking at a percentage in the high 70s. I mean, everybody kind of on the same page here with regard to her chances. So I see the race just stopping and starting with Fast. As far as some of the other horses in there goes, just a couple little notes. Comical, I think, is very talented, the daughter of Into Mischief. She won the Skylar Low when shipping back to Saratoga. But I think they've thrown a lot at her very quickly. You know, that race was just the second start of her career on July 11th. She came back quickly in the Sorrento, and not everybody who even, breaks their maiden early runs in the Sorrento and the Del Mar Debutante. She did that, and she went to New York this summer. So I think that kind of took a little bit out of her. Buyer's Remorse, I like her. She's a maiden in this field, but she really battled in that career debut. She ended up finishing second to Stellar Sound. Big fan of the offspring of Liam's Map. But again, I mean, they're all just up against it. I think the only other horse that some people might gravitate towards is Lucatia. She's the sixth in here to the outside for Pete Miller. And that second start where she broke the maiden by 14.5 lengths, that race is hard to, get away from. But if you open up the chart there, obviously we know it was softer company because they did run her for a high tag, 62,500. But you look at that Biddy Duke, who is Circles. Now, she has come back, if we open her PPs, to win twice. But those races have come against much softer company. They dropped her in for maiden 32 to break her maiden. Then she ran against starter allowance horses at the non-2 lifetime level. She was beating up on a pretty average field that day. So I think that some people might want to try and find a price and go to Lucatia. But for me, Dan, it's all about Bass. I think she runs circles around these fillies on Friday.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Lucatia too, because that was one that I looked at sort of naturally, looking for, is there anyone who can beat Bast? And, I came to the same things you did there, the 14-length maiden win. I'm like, could that have been a fluke? And then, I looked up the last race, and I just took another look at how that race set up, and she faced a lot of pressure to her outside. I did think she could be a bounce-back candidate here, especially if she ends up being loose on the lead. We'll see what happens, but you got to figure she's sent early, and she'll be there for a while, and conceivably, should face a little less pressure up front, and should be able to dictate from the outside post there. Joe, any strong feelings here? I believe you're on Team Bast. Am I right?
I'm on Team Bass, but betting wise, you just can't be on Team Bass because definitely going to go off at 3 to 5 or less. I was looking at been studying her a little, and maybe there's a little bias here as well because she beat Bulletproof One last time out, and I own a piece of Bulletproof One, and I know how good that horse is. You got Mike Smith on board. He wins at an incredible rate on these dirt tracks, and she had an outstanding bullet work a couple of days ago. I don't think anybody's going to beat Bass, but if you're going to go somewhere else, you got to find good odds. And been studying her, already beat a 1 to 5 favorite last time out, so maybe she could do it again.
All right. Well, if we can't find a price there, maybe we'll find one in the American Pharoah Stakes. We'll skip ahead to that one. Baffert, again, owns the record for most wins in this race as well. He'd be looking for his 9th score in this spot with 8 rings, a winner by 6 1/4 lengths on debut. And again, Johnny V aboard, but this is a larger and perhaps more evenly matched group. Christina, do you think the favorite here is a bit more vulnerable?
I do. I think he clearly has ability, and we saw that, in his debut, and he earned a really strong figure for that. The 6 1/4 length win at Del Mar back on August the 4th. But then in the race, in the Del Mar Futurity, and this was the day that Drayden Van Dyke was injured. If you haven't seen it, we can probably pull up that replay real quick because we only need to watch really the first quarter mile, if that. 8 Rings started to duck in from the inside post for a couple jumps, and Drayden Van Dyke was able to correct him a little bit. And then a few more steps away from the gate, he took a hard left right into the rail. And I think this has to be a concern. You know, you have a horse that's young that has done something along these lines. It's clearly a very bad habit. He caused a multiple, riders spill there. Fortunately, those riders are okay, and we are going to see Van Dyke back in action this weekend finally. But I think anytime you see something like that, it makes your favorite vulnerable. I'm not questioning his ability, but I'm questioning where he's at mentally and if he's going to be able to put it all together or, get up to something along those lines again. I'm actually going to pick the one-horse American Theorem in here. I'm not crazy about the post position draw for him, but I want to open the chart for that race. He's run once. He broke his maiden by a length and a half on August 31st at Del Mar. And if you look down at the bottom and see who the other trainers were that had horses in this race, Bob Baffert had one in here, John Sheriff had one in, Simon Callahan, Baffert with another one, Doug O'Neill. And then you look at the closing odds for this particular horse. He was the favorite in this field. And so I had heard about him for weeks. Bob Baffert was talking about how talented American Theorem was, and he's not even one of his horses. All eyes were on American Theorem that day. And I think you have to put a lot of credit into that because, the Sharpies that have been watching the workouts could clearly see that he had some ability, and that win was as easy as can be for him. He's the son of American Pharaoh. Now, we haven't actually seen the American Pharaoh offspring route on the main track yet. They have been successful doing that on the turf course. So I'm not doubting his ability to get the two turns at all. And I'm just going to kind of ride the wave a little bit with his talent. I am worried about the inside post. They are taking the blinkers off, which I find a little bit curious because he ran so well and he doesn't seem like a horse that's headstrong or going to, bolt or run away from there. But American Theorem will be the horse for me. The other horse that I thought was worth pointing out, and this will be sort of an obvious one, is Express Train before. He actually ran second to 8 Rings in the debut. And one of the things that I kind of picked up on a little bit this summer was John Sherrill with these 2-year-olds. It's somewhat surprising to me because I think he gets pigeonholed a little bit as being so patient and taking his time and not running horses, too early. But when they lead him to the 2-year-old races, as this horse and a couple others in his barn have this summer, he connects. You can see he's just having a good last month. He's 33% over the last 30 days. But as far as the 2-year-olds go in general, John Sheriff connects at 20%, which I think is just not a number that you would expect from his barn. He also has the benefit of having gone 2 terms already. Mike Smith will be back aboard. And I thought in that race on August 28th, he was so professional. He made multiple moves. He was push button, stop and start. He's a horse that's, better drawn in here, has the 2-turn race under his belt, and is already looking mentally like he's far more forward than especially 8 Rings or some of the others in the field. So for me, I'm actually going to throw the favorite out. I'm going to just play the 1 and the 4 in here. I think these are the next 2 best horses, but I'll put the 1 American Theorem on top.
All right, Christina taking a stand against the favorite. How about you, Joe? Where do you stand here?
Well, I actually like the favorite here. The combination of Johnny Velasquez and Bob Baffert, hard to find a better combination. Obviously, the collision on the last race took 8 Rings out of that race, and hopefully we don't see anything like that today, this weekend, I should say. But I think 8 Rings has a great chance to win this race. Actually, the horse that concerns me the most might be on the far outside in Collusion Illusion. You've got Talamo on board again after the victory in the Grade 2 Best Pal Stakes. His sire's Twirling Candy, who just has absolutely outstanding numbers with his offspring, with the offspring, and Talamo has just tremendous numbers when it comes to finishing in the money. With the outside post, he should get a clean ride, and I have a feeling Talamo will have him there at the wire.
And interesting watching the replays of both the maiden win and the Best Pal victory last out. Decent prices both times. So Collusion Illusion hasn't gotten much respect yet. We'll see if he gets the respect tomorrow. A horse I like actually is a horse that Collusion Illusion beat on debut. A little bit of a long shot. Defense Wins, the 6 horse. We did take a look at the beginning of the Del Mar Futurity, and if we could pop up that replay and kind of move ahead a little bit, kind of as they approach the turn for home, I just kind of wanted to to draw a little bit of attention to Defense Wins and how he was running late in that race. This will take a second to get buffered and ready to go. But there's Defense Wins there down on the rail. He's the 3 horse. And you'll be able to see here as they make this turn in, he's passing horses, and he just needs a little bit of running room here, but he gets shut off here, and I can't tell you that this was significant enough to cost him a victory. I will say though, if you continue watching, watch him tip out here. He finds some clear running, and moves nicely late, and he does something after this race that he did on debut as well, which is that he gallops out in front of them and he runs on really, really well. And so for me, I thought if you're looking for a horse on the stretch out who might potentially be there he is. You see him kind of, aside from the loose horse, he's galloping out in front of him. He's one who I think will like the added distance. If we go back, one of the great things about Stats Race Lens is that you could really customize all sorts of searches here and do trainer research. And one of the trainer searches that I did was for trainer Doug O'Neill. And we looked at the past 5 years with 2-year-olds only in dirt races, first route, all stakes races. So this is specifically for Doug O'Neill and his horses. You can see pretty decent numbers there. 19 starts, 5 wins, in the money more than half the time. So a 26% win rate and a positive ROI. A lot to like there. I think Defense Wins will be completely overlooked here. I think he'll get every bit of 15 to 1. Can he win? I don't know. Do I think he'll be there? Do I have any concerns about the distance for him? I don't. I think he's a horse who will like the added distance, and if he gets anything resembling some sort of pace setup, I think he could run on late to at least grab a share at what could be a nice price. So I think we've covered just about, between the 3 of us. I'd hope there'd be a winner here. We don't usually have this much disagreement between our top picks, but it's good. We've got a lot of variety. I think we heard a couple of great arguments here from Christina on American Theorem and Express Train. Joe told us why he's a fan of the favorite 8 Rings. And for me, again, if you're looking for a little bit of a price, I thought Defense Wins could be a factor. So let's now move ahead to Saturday. We'll go into the Saturday portion of the Win in Your In races, and we'll go to Belmont. This race, the first race of the day that'll be a Win in Your In race, will be the Bosberg. It marks the return of Imperial Hint, coming back off of one of the performances of the summer when he crushed the Vanderbilt at Saratoga. He also won this race last year. This Bosberg attracts, I think, a small but talented group, including Promises Fulfilled and Horse for Course Firenze Fire. Joe, I set you up there with Firenze Fire. I think you have a bit of an interest in him. How do you think this race shapes up?
Oh, I see it as a 2-horse race between Imperial Hint and Firenze Fire. Imperial Hint is hoping the 3rd time's the charm when it comes to the Breeders' Cup. Been there the last 2 years. I believe has a 2nd and a 3rd. Very lightly raced for the 6-year-old this year, and you have Javier Castellano on him, and just an outstanding horse with an outstanding rider. Also has won 2 of 3 on the Belmont course. But I also believe that you've got a lightly raced horse that is really geared up for the Breeders' Cup, and this is a race just to prepare for that race. And you're going to get a horse. If you play that horse, you're going to get short odds, in my opinion. So I started looking at Firenze Fire, who finished 3rd to Imperial Hint in July, but ran a much improved 2nd to Matoli last time out. I'm a little worried about Imperial Hint coming off that 2-month rest, as I said. And so I think the Firenze Fire could find a place here at decent odds, 4 to 1 or better, hopefully, and get to the wire first and punch a ticket to the Breeders' Cup.
All right. And Christina, I know you're largely focused on the action out in California, but you have an opinion here in the Vosburg?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I like Firenze Fire as well. I've always been a big fan of this horse, and a big part of that is because he just is very tenacious. He's the kind that you sort of want in your corner when you're going to be duking it out, down the length of the stretch. Imperial Hint, he is just freaky good on his best day, and we saw that in the Vanderbilt. And I would notice too, with him in the pattern, he is able to kind of back it up. He can come back and run back-to-back big races like that. But he hasn't often run into Promises Fulfilled. And so I think those two drawn alongside against each other is just a very dangerous combination. Neither one of them is going to take their foot off the gas pedal. And I think that puts Frenzy Fire in a great position, and especially with regard to his post position, he loves Belmont. There's a lot of reasons to kind of think that the race might unfold to his benefit on Saturday.
Yeah, you talk about the pace dynamics here, and it is dangerous for both of those horses. I mean, Imperial Hint, I think got a pretty ideal setup, showed that it could sit just off of the heat that we saw in that Vanderbilt. But, I would say I think we know that Promises Fulfilled is going. And I think it's very possible that Imperial Hint might just sort of ease back a little bit earlier. And I think that could be dangerous for everyone in this field, though, because Promises Fulfilled, we know on his best day, when loose on the lead, can be extremely dangerous. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the opening quarter of this race, what will dictate a whole lot. And I think we'll have a pretty good sense for how the race might shape up after that opening quarter. But the one thing we know time after time, regardless of pace, regardless of setup, Frenzy Fire, if the race is over the dirt at Belmont, Frenzy Fire will be there late. So I agree with you. It might be a little bit of a safe play, but I think Frenzy Fire is a smart play as well in the Vosburg. So the second win in your end race we have on Saturday at Belmont is the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Again, another small but immensely talented field here. Headliners are the set of 3-year-olds, Tacitus and Code of Honor. You've also got the Woodward winner, Preservationist, who, by the way, ran an even more impressive race 3 races back at Belmont when he took the Suburban. Joe, where do you land here?
Well, I'm going to go with the horse that has been the bridesmaid just too many times in Tacitus. Tacitus had a tough trip in the Kentucky Derby. Granted, many horses had a tough trip in the Kentucky Derby, but still finished 4th. Since that race, Tacitus has run three straight seconds, losing to just fantastic horses, and Winston, Tax, and of course Code of Honor in this race. You've got Jose Ortiz remaining on board, I should say, and he loves this track, obviously. You've got a great trainer in Mott, who's just having an outstanding year. And we all know you just can't go wrong with a Tappet kid. I mean, Tappet is just an outstanding sire. This is his 3rd race after a short layoff, and I think he'll be firing and ready to go and finally hit the winner's circle.
3-year-olds against older. It is later in the year now as we approach the Breeders' Cup. If you're going to do it in the Classic, certainly you would hope that you could do it here. Christina, what do you think of that dynamic? You going with one of the older horses, or are you going to take a shot with one of the 3-year-olds?
3-year-olds as well as the other one, actually. I'm a big fan of Claire, and I think we actually talked about him on our last webinar, and I've followed this horse for a very long time. And if you go back to sort of January, March, into the sort of time when we were approaching the Kentucky Derby, one of the things that he had told me and talked about a lot was he was just having a hard time kind of keeping weight on this horse. And sort of in his physical development, I think Shug always saw the ability there, but he kind of wasn't durable enough to stand up to that. And I think now that we are getting to the end of the year and he is kind of growing into himself, he is becoming the horse and putting it all together that they always thought, he could be. He was the winner of the Travers at the 1.25 mile last out. You don't have any questions about the distance. I think if Shug is going to bring him back, then, he's going to be continuing to thrive and improving. And he's a horse that showed a lot of heart and determination, in the Kentucky Derby as well. Came from way out of it. He has that style. I think Belmont will suit him very, very well. We saw that early in his career when he was second in the Champagne. So I will go with Code of Honor just because I think we're catching him at the right time right now, where he's really blossoming and kind of coming into him.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Of the 3-year-olds, I'd side with Code of Honor myself, but I do get Joe's point as well. Tacitus, eventually his day will come. Will it be Saturday? That remains to be seen. My gut tells me, I'm going to go with the with the older horse here, and if I'm going to go with an older horse, it's going to be Preservationist for me. I thought that 110 Equibase speed figure in the Suburban was big. He also ran a career best 111 at Belmont in his race prior. Likes this track a lot. The Woodward performance was eye-opening to me, and I thought that was a fairly tough field. So I think Preservationist is right there. Vino Rosso is another horse who will eventually you feel that he's close and he'll break through. I thought the Whitney was not necessarily emblematic of his best. And again, look who we ran into. We ran into McKinsey, and Yoshida ran an enormous race that day as well. So Vino Rosso, not to be taken lightly. It should be a great running of the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Again, small but extremely deep and talented field. So interested to see how that shapes up. Now, poor Tom Kudla, who's running the back end of this thing, the team at Equibase, are going to switch us back here to Santa Anita. We are shifting back to Santa Anita for two more Win and You're In races Saturday, starting with the Rodeo Drive. Win and You're In for the filly and mare turf. None of the runners entered have punched their BC tickets just yet, though Bo Recall comes in on a bit of a roll, winner of 3 of her last 4, including the yellow ribbon last out. Question is, does the race go through her, or is there another challenger here who could emerge? Christina, I know you're on top of this one. What do you think?
I am. Joe, I'll definitely be rooting for you with Mirth in there, because I think this is the most wide open of all the races that we are going to take a look at. I have a lot of respect for Bo Recall, and I think that, you're seeing in the last several races since Brad Cox took over, she's been able to kind of develop, and maybe that's age. I'm not sure what it, is accounting for it, but he does seem to be getting a couple more lengths out of her and a few more points as far as the Equibase speed figures go. One of the first places I went for this race, though, because I was just wondering if I was the only one that saw it that wide open, was on the True Odds page. So I pulled that up, and I was kind of muddled as far as the actual pace goes. And so I sorted it by run style just to take a look, because I always like to see, how the True Odds page thinks these horses are going to line up. And really, it's kind of what I thought. I don't really see anybody as clear-cut wanting to take the lead. And maybe, Joe, you can let us know if you think Mirth is going to be one of those that tries to get a little bit aggressive out there. I also like to sort on late pace figures. I just think that's always comes in handy for you, kind of a little thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're talking about turf racing, especially. So Recall finishes off her races very quickly. So does February and Irish, though, and they're not actually that far off of each other. And you can see even on the win percentage probability that True Odds is telling you, they're seeing this race is a little bit more wide open than I think the odds are going to reflect on race day. So I actually ended up going with Excellent Sunset in here. She's the 5, but we can go back to her past performances. She spent quite a bit of time on the sidelines from December of last year to August 30th of this year, when she came back in that optional $62,000 race. And we can pull up kind of the last maybe 16th of a mile or so from that replay. I think a lot of people will hold it against her that she didn't win that race, because it was a lower level. We're jumping back into stakes, company right now. She was the heavy favorite on this occasion, but I think you're going to find that as they get closer to the wire, she didn't really see the winner. And Super Patriot is the horse that Richard Baltas has picked up and has just, gone bananas out there. I don't even know how to describe the turn of foot from Super Patriot that we've seen in the last couple of races for her. And I don't think that Excellent Sunset ever really saw her coming. Excellent Sunset was battling the horse to her inside, Great Return, put that one away, but never really saw the winner. So I'm going to give her more credit on that second place finish than I think a lot of people will. I'm also looking at her Equibase speed figures, and I think that, she's 5 years old now, and it looks like she kind of picked up where she left off. And being that we are running second off the layoff, I think she's going to improve come Saturday. She hasn't gone the distance yet. It's a little surprising. She's a daughter of Exceed Excel. You would think that she might not appreciate the full minor quarter that we're getting, but when you watch her run and you look at her style, I think she's going to love it. I think she's actually been crying out for this for a long time. So I'll go for it here with a price and hope that Excellent Sunset can surprise them all on Saturday.
I love it, and a great storyline if Excellent Sunset can do it. Would love to see Anna Mea a young trainer make it to the Breeders' Cup with a horse who had quite the storied path to this point. With the DQ last winter and coming back this year, looking like she's in as good a form as ever. And it'll be interesting to see what she can do in this spot. All right, Joe. If not Anomea, then I want Mirth to win for you. Make the case.
Well, I must say I was a little bit of shock yesterday when I got the email from Billy Koch telling me that we had entered into the race. I had looked over this race earlier in the day, just looking at the entries, possibles, and knew that this was going to be the most wide open race of the day. I was actually very shocked that only 6 horses entered out of the group. I don't think there's a horse in the group that's any better than any of the others. I think it's as wide open as can possibly be. It's going to be interesting how the pace of the race is made, and I would look at I look at Paved as being the horse with the best pedigree out of the group as to races. That's an Eclipse, a thoroughbred horse that I know very well, having been in many of their partnerships. But honestly, I don't see one horse any better than the others. I think this is going to be one of the best betting races of the day because I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite. As to what Mirth is going to do, if I said one thing, I'd probably be tied up and beaten by Billy, as we don't want to share any of the strategy, which I don't really have anything to do with anyway. So
come on, Joe, you can tell us. Come on, we're all friends here.
Oh, the last time I even shared something on TVG as a joke, Billy got phone calls left and right. What is Joe doing? So I will stay quiet as to what the idea is to Mirth, but I will say that I think she's perfectly in this race. I was very happy to see that we actually did enter, and I think she will run outstanding on Saturday, and we'll hopefully get some black type.
So the gag order is in effect.
Always.
I will. I'm going to read through some of this and make a prediction. When it comes to pace dynamics and strategy, I'm going to take a guess that we might see Mirth on the lead. We'll start there, and we'll see how far she can take them. I did want to make a quick case on another horse. Take a little bit of the heat off of Joe right now. Make a quick case on Elise's World, or Alicia's World. I always have trouble with that name. Absolutely love her in this spot. And again, sentimentally, I might want a couple of others to potentially win this race. But I did, in kind of taking a look at this race, come back to this horse a number of times. Earlier this year, she posted a career best and race best 1:15 Equibase speed figure. That's one factor. You look through the last few races, they leave a little bit to be desired, but you didn't get ideal trips in either of those 2 races, especially in the Yellow Ribbon when she was too far back off a pace that was way too slow. I do consider this a fairly significant jockey upgrade when you talk about turf riders. Flavien Prat riding on Saturday. I love Joe Talama, don't get me wrong, but Flavien Prat on the turf I will take any day. And then I did want to look at some of the research that we dug up on Richard Baltus. That's quite revealing, I think. Again, I love how you can customize some of these searches. So did a trainer search for Richie Baltus past 5 years, 3rd off the layoff on the turf, going long in graded stakes at Santa Anita specifically. And you've got 18 starts, 6 wins, 11 in the money. Again, very high in the money percentage, and winning 1 out of every 3 races. Got to love that. And again, a positive ROI. So taking all that into consideration, I think the pace really will again determine who wins this race. If Mirth can get out there and establish a slow pace, maybe she takes them all the way. If someone else can do that, maybe because on paper, a very small field, but sometimes they surprise you and you may find a pace battle in a race like this that you're not expecting. But if they go honest enough, fast enough early, I think Alicia's World is one to keep an eye on. I do like the selection of Excellent Sunset as well, as a bit of a long shot. So a couple of different ways to go here, even though it is a smaller field. And of course, we'll be wishing the best to Joe and the team there with Mirth. So we've covered a good number of the races through Saturday. We've got one more win in your in race on Saturday. It's the big one at Santa Anita. It's the Awesome Again Stakes. It's proven to be a strong springboard for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Contenders, first of all, it creates contenders and it creates winners, including Accelerate last year, Mucho Macho Man in 2013. This year's prohibitive classic favorite, McKinsey, is the horse to beat here in the Awesome Again, coming off his dominant win in the Whitney last out. Christina, it looks like you see a couple of horses in the mix here, including McKinsey, right?
That's right. I mean, it does seem to be a two-horse race to me, really, and I think that's probably how it's going to be bet. I mean, McKinsey will be the favorite, higher power, second price. The only kind of wacky thing I could see potentially happening is just because higher power has drawn the inside post, and when Mike Smith is confident, and I know he has a lot of confidence on McKinsey, kind of just puts him right into the race. I think there's a slight possibility that, you know, those two could hook up very early on and be at each other's throats throughout this race. And if that happens, I think Draft Pick might be the horse that's kind of sitting in that catbird seat to maybe inherit their demise if that does happen. One of the stats that I pulled was something that I ended up looking at for all of the trainers in here, but I started with John Sadler because I wanted to know, you know, they bought this horse, Higher Power, out of the Keeneland April sale. They ran him once in the Gold Cup in May, and it was kind of a flat effort. Then they put him on the turf, and he ran very well in a couple of turf races. Then he comes back in the Pacific Classic and just dazzles everybody with that 5 1/4 length win. And in talking to John, he was saying that, you know, just as I had the horse in my program, as we were kind of able to get to know him, we always bought him intending to have a dirt classic distance type runner, but it took us a little while to, you know, assimilate him into our program. And so he did. He put it all together in that race, in the Pacific Classic. But coming back off of races like that, John Sadler, when you're coming back from wins last out and competing in stakes races again, he hits at a pretty high percentage. He's at 24%. And that's with a pretty strong number of runners, too. You're talking about 126 horses here over the past 5 years that have put him in that position is 30 stakes wins. I mean, some people will go their whole lives and not train 30 stakes winners. And then I went ahead just because I was curious, and we're talking McKinsey, we're talking about, you know, Sadler and Baffert. I went to the show all option just to see how this particular specific statistic pertained to the rest of the field. And you can see, not by any kind of surprise, Bob Baffert at 36% in this category. Now, he has had more opportunities. He's dealing with 287 starters. We're talking about 104 stakes winners that have been able to just back it up again and again. They come back and they continue to perform. I think at the end of the day, for me, I do think McKinsey is probably the better horse. I think you're seeing Bob Baffert be much more confident in him this year. I think last year when he ran him in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he ended up really regretting that and feeling like he kind of threw too much too soon at McKinsey. You know, they missed the Kentucky Derby with him in that whole, you know, season or part of the season. And then they came back and kind of rushed through the Pennsylvania Derby and into the Breeders' Cup Classic. This year, he's traveled in. You know, he had the trouble trip of the year, I think we could say, in the Met Mile. Then he traveled back again with that first win in the Whitney. And as you watch kind of the final 16th of the mile there, Mike Smith was down on his belly, and he pulled his stick through at the quarter pole. But I don't think he ever had to use it. If anything, he maybe went to it once. So I'm looking at McKinsey and just seeing a horse that, you know, has so much ability. The numbers are there. Mike Smith is going to give him a confident ride. And while I respect Higher Power a lot, and I think he is, you know, getting better right now, the longer that he spends with John Sadler, I think McKinsey at the end of the day is going to be kind of the horse for me and the pick for me in here. But if you just look at him come down the stretcher, I mean, Smith just kind of gets down. You know, Mike Smith knows he has a lot of horse when he gets really low and very aerodynamic like that. It's kind of just that polished finish that you see from McKinsey here across wire in the Whitney. And bear in mind, you know, he's putting away a good horse. Yoshida came for home under a full head of steam that day. Vino Rosso behind him as well. So you might kind of get a little bit of a line on the California West Coast horses versus the East Coast horses too, depending on how Vino Rosso runs back east. So McKenzie for me, a higher power. I have a lot of respect for him, and the only kind of crazy thing I could see happening is perhaps those two dueling each other in draft picks, picking up the pieces.
You had to be tracking McKenzie by the silks there, because the saddle towels all looked fairly similar as they were turning for home. But yeah, the confident ride there by Mike Smith, an incredible performance there by McKenzie and the Whitney. Joe, are we looking at a Murth McKenzie double?
Oh, if it is, it's a Mike Smith double. It starts with McKenzie, it ends with McKenzie, it ends with McKenzie taking pictures, in my opinion. I just think this horse is at the top of the game right now. I think this horse is going to be the favorite come classic time, and I think it's going to be very difficult for anybody to beat him on Saturday.
Yeah, look, McKenzie runs his race, he wins. Just nitpicking for fun, I did try to see if I can come up with any negatives, and what I came up with was that he hasn't actually won at Santa Anita going beyond a mile. He did cross the wire first in the San Felipe last year, but was DQ'd. There's probably an argument to be made that if he's vulnerable at any distance, maybe it's this one. I mean, he's only 2 for 3 at the distance. And I'd also suggest he doesn't need to be fully cranked for this one, and might be coming in with the screws just a little loose after that massive effort last out. So I think if you're going to make a case against him, those are, the only plausible cases you can make. And for me, if I was going to take a shot with a horse, it would be Seeking the Soul, potentially. This is his first race at Santa Anita. I think he'll fire a big one here after a race that was so uncharacteristically bad last out. I like that Brian Hernandez is coming in for this ride. He's previously ridden Seeking the Soul to a grade 3 win and a runner-up finish in last year's Dirt Mile. On class, he obviously is one who would fit here, and he's, I think, best positioned to take advantage of McKenzie should he not be, 100% on Saturday. So Seeking the Soul for me, I think if you're playing multis and you're looking to sneak in a horse that's not McKenzie, because everyone's singling McKenzie, Seeking the Soul would be the horse that I use. But certainly Christina made a pretty compelling argument a moment ago as well. So look, I think logic tells us it should be McKenzie, but we'll see. That's why they run the races. And it would have taken somebody with true insight into the future to have, for example, last weekend picked Math Wizard. So we'll see what happens in this spot. There is one more race. The PPs, I do not believe, are out yet. Last I checked for the Zenyatta Stakes on Sunday, but we did want to give Joe an opportunity to tell us about one of his other horses. We're going to take a look. Let's see if the PPs are out yet. Are they? Oh, there they are. Okay, they're up. All right, Joe, you want to set us up? You've got another interest in this race, am I right? Oh, there we go, right off the bat, Secret Spice.
And we drew hole number 1. How do you like that? Both races. Well, there's no question. Secret Spice has a specific running style. One race at Santa Anita back, I believe it was in March, if I'm not mistaken. We traveled to Kentucky in May, lost by, I believe, a half a length. Then we raced in Del Mar last month and lost by a neck. And in both of those 2 races, we did pass the winning horse and then were repassed, which hopefully will not be the case this Sunday. This horse is ready to go, top of the game. And I don't know whether or not hopefully she's able to win on Sunday and punch her ticket. I'm sure she's going to go one way or the other. And that Breeders' Cup race might be the Breeders' Cup race of the when you look at all the horses in these fields across the country that will be going to that Breeders' Cup race, because there are just so many fantastic older fillies out there at this distance, running across the country. It might be one of the deepest fields come Breeders' Cup Saturday. Yep,
absolutely. And this race too, fills out quite nicely. You got Ollie's Candy in there as well. You guys are second choice with Secret Spice. La Force as well, and Paradise Woods, who we know can run a really big race. Christina, have you had a chance to take a look at this one?
I didn't. I was actually checking right before we kind of came up to see if those past performances were up. So it's all kind of new to me. But I see a big argument for Spice Perfection. I'm a big fan of Ollie's Candy too. I think she's just shown, so much versatility throughout her career, and has the ability, again, another one that John Sadler, had her for a little bit of time, and here she's coming and assimilating pretty well into their program. So I think you have to give her a good long look. And I would agree with Joe. I mean, you think about just this division and Midnight Bisou and a late, maybe even considering running against the boys to perhaps, they're talking about going for the distance, so maybe to get away from Midnight Bisou a little bit too. And we also have a very strong crop of 3-year-old fillies that are going to have to take on these older mares come Breeders' Cup. So I completely agree. It could be, one of the most exciting races that we see over the Breeders' Cup weekend.
Absolutely. I was at an event actually the other night with the theme being the future is female, and I think that's very much true in horse racing, especially. The future, the present is also female, but as we look ahead this year, I think it really is, sort of in the female divisions, we've seen some of the most impressive racing all year, both the 3-year-olds and some of the older horses as well. And so we'll see how this race shapes up. If you want a more a more research and handicap view from Christina, be sure to follow her on Twitter, Joe as well. As we wrap up here, I do want to remind people, if you missed the beginning of this somehow, that right now, the Stats Race Lens special still in effect for all customers, whether you've had a subscription before, whether you've used a promo code before, you can use this one. It's an unlimited subscription to Stats Race Lens for just $199 for a quarterly subscription. So for an entire quarter, you get every track every day, $199, and the promo code is ROAD2BC, ROAD2BC. So thank you again to Christina. Thank you again to Joe. Thank you to the team at Equibase. We wish everyone a lot of luck this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. It kicks off Friday, and it goes all the way through Sunday. Great setup for the Breeders' Cup. We're about a month out, and we get a great preview this weekend, racing coast to coast. If you're playing, best of luck.